All right, so we are going to talk about food chains and food webs. It is obviously Western Day with my freckles. Um, mm, so food chains and food webs. We're going to be talking about how these food chains and food webs transfer energy. We talked about how nutrients cycle through an ecosystem. Now we're going to talk about how energy cycles through an ecosystem. We did talk about that a little bit with our energy pyramids and trophic levels, but now we're going to talk about specifically what that looks like in practice with an ecosystem. So food webs and food chains show how matter and energy flow through an ecosystem from organism to organism. So now we're only looking at the living part of those cycles and not the geosphere and the atmosphere. We're just looking at the living part. When one organism preys on another or eats another in that interaction called predation, the matter, the nutrients, the atoms, and energy are passed from the prey to the predator. The arrows on the food web indicate the direction of the energy flow. So it's what's getting eaten and the energy goes up to the predator. So always try to think about the arrow going up the food chain because the energy is going up the food chain. A food chain just shows one linear path of energy and matter. So it's just the grasshopper eats the grass, the mouse eats the grasshopper, and the owl eats the mouse. The food web is going to show you at least two interconnected food chains, and most likely a food web is going to show you all the interconnected food chains within an ecosystem. So when you're looking at a food web, you should see this interconnected web of how all of the energy can be passed from the producer all the way up to that tertiary consumer. So you got, here's your single food web, right? All of these are occurring this one food web, but then this blue food web also interacts with the red. All right. Organisms can exist in multiple trophic levels. That's the other benefit of that food web, right? So you have this bunny is a primary consumer and the grasshopper is a primary consumer, but some organisms might eat multiple things. So this deer could eat grass, but it could also eat this spider or fly. Let me move this here. All right. So here the grass eats, or sorry, the hare eats the grass. The grass eats the hare. The hare eats the grass. The owl eats the hare. But here the owl ends up being a tertiary consumer because the owl's eating a robin. Okay. So you can see how they would exist on a variety of levels. Those interactions between organisms occur at a variety of levels, and food webs can show how an increase or decrease in a population can impact the rest of the food web. So if you have more predators, then you're going to have a decrease in your primary consumer population, and then an increase in your herbivore population, and then eventually a decrease in your producers. So you can see the interactions that those things have on the rest of the population and the rest of the food web. That can throw a food web out of balance and create what we call a trophic cascade. A trophic cascade is the removal or addition of a top predator. That removing this python or adding more pythons into this ecosystem is going to affect all the organisms underneath. And that's going to also in turn affect some of the organisms above. So here's another example. A decline in the wolf population is going to make more deer, but less trees. So if you want to do some practice here on free response, if you look at one direct effect that decline in a frog population would have on the food web, and then identify an organism that can be a secondary and a tertiary consumer. So if you want to write that in your notebook as a little practice, you can. All right, that is it for today.